Thank you. Thank you so much. So I actually feel a little bit like a fish out of water here because with all the experts that just talked and all the people that have talked during the course of the day, they're all the people that know things about the mobile industry, and I'm actually an outsider of the mobile industry. So everything I'm going to talk about is going to talk about my journey as entering into this mobile industry and learning about it. But that being said, the company is not a new company. The company has been on the ground for 5 years. It was founded by Yuval, who's sitting in the back right there, and another gentleman named Erez, who's recovering from Corona and not here with us today. And we play in the general space of caller ID apps, spam blocking, contact list management, et cetera. You might have heard of some of our competitors. One of them I'll even mention named Truecaller. The thing that makes us different than all of those companies is that we don't do just caller ID. We do things like matching photos. So you don't see just the name and phone number of somebody that calls you, but you also see the photo of the person that's calling you. And all kinds of other things that are related to communication. And as a communication center, we try to be less around the application of caller ID and more around your life in your communication using your phone and humanizing that. A little bit about us. There are some stats here on the board about what we are and what we've done up until now. A few things about the company. So number one, we're most proud of the fact that almost all of our 55 million plus, it's actually close to 60 million now downloads, were done organically. Word of mouth is a very, very strong thing. We spend almost nothing on user acquisition. Our almost 5 million daily active users all come from the fact that the second thing that we're most proud of is that users love us. We are very proud and work very hard to keep our rating very high in the Play Store. We have the highest rating in the category of all of the apps, even apps that have raised lots and lots of money. In a minute, I'll talk about our journey in the fundraising side of the world. But we are able to maintain a very high rating in this store because we're very responsive. We get hundreds of mails and posts every single day. We respond to them all. Bug fixing, feature requests. We're constantly reiterating on the app. Our usual cycle is around 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks at the most, before we put up a new version of the app. Just quickly, a little bit about our markets. We have global appeal in that we basically have a user in every single country in the world. Obviously, there are countries that are larger for us and smaller for us, countries that are growing. These are our largest countries, India being the largest country, very similar, by the way, to Truecaller. But beyond that, we also have growing markets. Pretty much all the markets are growing for us, but we have a number of markets that are growing faster. There's some music up here. We obviously have a desire to get into Tier 1 countries as opposed to only the second-tier countries. Another question that I get asked a lot is, what makes a country good for us? There are a number of criteria of things that make a country good for us, but these are the three that are typical for Eyecon. So number one, we're very heavily Android. We do have an iOS app, but most of our market, 99% of our market is around Android. We like to be in countries where people make a lot of phone calls. So India, people make on average 35 phone calls, receive and make 35 phone calls a day, as opposed to Western countries like the United States where they make maybe 7 phone calls a day. And then people suffer from spam calls. And I know that everyone suffers from spam calls, but spam call prevalence is very, very high in the markets where there are a lot of phone calls. It's kind of obvious. So when I first came into the company about a year and a half ago, it's obvious, and I'm a high-tech entrepreneur. I've done 25 startups in the last 20 years of entrepreneurship, but like I said, first time in the B2C mobile world. It's all about data, right? And you guys all know this. I'm not telling you anything new. It's all about data and using the data to understand the user behavior and your users so that you make sure that the product market fit is right and to make sure that you're growing in the right way. And specifically understanding how your users are using the product and how your users are loving the product or not loving it. You put out a new feature, is it used or not used? And I'm going to talk a little bit about the problems with the data and problems with addressing the data, or at least as the way I see it, again, as an outsider to the industry. But I want to now mention a little bit about our funding. So we, even though we were initially funded, we had a seed round a number of years ago, we're more or less a bootstrap company now. And it's kind of a badge of courage for us that we are cash flow positive. We're very, very proud of the fact that we're able to basically cover all of our expenses with the revenue that we make from advertising, where 98% of our revenue comes from advertising, another 2% from premium members. But that causes us to make certain decisions with everything that we're going to talk about around data that you might not make if you were funded by a VC, and we're intentionally not funded by a VC, at least for now. And that means that everything that we do has to be, every project that we do, every integration that we do, every SDK that we put in has to have some kind of ROI positive to it. And it doesn't mean that everything does, but we always measure things from the fact that we put an investment into a data set or a tool, and we want to see something positive that comes out of after it. And of course, it has to do with advertising, has to do with tools and things like that. The second thing is what I call the Goldilocks problem, and that is that we're both a big company and a small company at the same time. So we have this issue that we have a lot of users and a ton of data, and looking at all the data and storing all that data is extraordinarily expensive to do that. But we're also a small company, and we don't have the money to do all those kinds of things, so we have to make all of those decisions based on the too small and too big problem at the same time, which is an interesting dichotomy. And the second thing that happens, or the third thing that happens, is what I call data inconsistencies or anomalies. And in a minute, I'll show you some examples of some of these data inconsistencies that I'm talking about. At the end of the day, we could spend all day, every single day, just looking at data. And we're a small company, we're fewer than 15 people, and if we looked at the data all the time, we wouldn't be building our business, we wouldn't be building our user base, we wouldn't be growing the app and the features within the app and looking at our users. And spending, and I'm going to say something that's a little controversial, but spending too much time on data is counterproductive to the actual growth of the company. So keep in mind that with all the tools that I'm sure you guys all know, and some of them were up here on the stage, and not to disparage any company, and I don't want to say anything bad about any company, everyone has these great tools, but the pricing in the industry is pricing that a tweener company like ours can't usually afford. And why not? Because it's all based on user base. So if you're going to pay X number of cents per user, per tool, multiply that out by a number of tools, and our LTV is only X number of cents, basically we're taking all of our revenue, all of what would be our profit in the company, and putting it into the pocket of the tools companies. And that is a really big problem for a company that hasn't raised money yet. And so, inevitably, we are always going to choose a tool that is free, especially if there's an alternative that's pretty close to good that is free. And remember, I mentioned we're heavily into the Android world, so we're heavily into the Google world, which means that we're using as many free tools that Google provides. So we're very heavily into Firebase and to Google Analytics and Play Console with all that's around that. I'd like to at least give a slight shout out on the attribution side of things, because we were able to find one partner that was able to work with us in the shape that we are as this tweener company, and that's Adjust, and we've implemented them as our attribution platform. And then our mediation platform, once again, back to the free side of the world, we use AdMob for our mediation, so it's Google, 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 Google. Great, that's all well and good. But now comes the inconsistencies and the anomalies that I was talking about. So I get in front of investors and they say to me, what's your DAU? What's your MAU? And so I say, great, fantastic. We'll go to Firebase, and that's what the Firebase number says. 3.7 million, beautiful. But we actually know that our DAU is not 3.7 million because we have this little thing called a server, and that server sees our unique users, and we actually know that our unique users on a daily basis is around 4.3 million. Now, that's quite a big gap, a huge gap in just the most simple of metrics that we are always asked about, and that's our DAU. And so, we go into this and we look into this, and like I said, it's a rabbit hole that we could spend hours, days, weeks trying to mitigate what is this problem and how is this problem solved and how do we answer it. But at the end of the day, the investor doesn't want to hear a problem. They just want to hear, what's your DAU? They don't want to know that there's a problem behind the numbers or the anomaly behind the numbers. I'll give you another example, but I have hundreds of examples like this. And this is what I found as I came into this industry, is that they're always this. So I mentioned we don't do very much in the user acquisition campaigns, but we do some. Here's an example of a campaign that we ran. $1,000 spent, installs reported. We did a Google ad campaign. 42,000 users installed our product. Awesome. That's great. except our attribution platform reported 22,000. Now we're starting to talk about not a difference of a few 100,000 users, now it's basically a 2x factor. Now how am I going to be able to calculate ROAS? How am I going to be able to calculate ROI? Which numbers should I use to actually measure if that campaign was successful or not successful? Right? We're talking about a factor of 2. It's all the difference in the world of whether it was good or whether it was bad. And so these kinds of problems happen all the time, especially for someone like me that doesn't really understand what's going on, but also in our company. And we don't have the time to spend on investigating why this is happening, how this is happening, even though we have to, right? This is our core business. This is how we are going to understand our users and understand our growth. And so at the end of the day, we have to come up with a different set of maybe metrics or tools or understanding of how to understand our users and what our user base is doing. And this is kind of the last thing I'll leave you with, and that is, at least the way I see it, and that is event tracking. And so if instead of using all this data and diving into this data and mitigating the problems and the anomalies and things like that, if we just focus only on the events in our app, we're able to understand our users' behavior. And so we have hundreds of events in the app that are firing all the time. I'm going to say another controversial thing and say we don't do it in any automatic way. We do it very manually. We have a young intern who has joined our company post-Army, and that's what he does. He spends a couple of hours every single week taking all of the events, putting them on an Excel spreadsheet that looks like this, without the numbers, and we monitor events over time per country. We have a monthly meeting where we're looking at all of these events, and what we're understanding is the trends of our users and users' behavior within the app, not necessarily looking at any of the data suites and any of the data tools that all these tens or hundreds of companies out there do, but rather focusing on the actual usage patterns of our users over time. We put out a new feature, we put an event on it, we monitor the event, the uptake of the event, we're able to graph it out and able to see how users are uptaking events and how they're using our product. And then that way we have a better, I would say, a better sense of product market fit, how much people actually love the product, and how we can drive more traffic to doing the events that people like and less traffic to the events that people don't like. So that's all I have to say. First of all, if anyone here has ideas, solutions for us, ways to look at things differently that we're not looking at it today, more than happy to hear. I learn a new thing literally every single day in the company. Yuval teaches me stuff all the time, and it's really, really a dynamic and wonderful place to learn things. But I also love to talk to other people and hear from other people new ideas and new ways of looking at things. And if you have any questions for me, more than happy to answer either here or afterwards. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ken Zweibel. Eyecon. Again, Eyecon people, show yourselves. Okay. Comments, questions, violent pushback, strong disagreement, mild disagreement, agreement, anyone? Okay.
Similar problems?
Yes. Question for you. 25 companies, how is this company and this industry different than everything else?
So first of all, that's a great question. So first of all, it's very, very dynamic. And so I mentioned this is the first time I did a B2C mobile company. It's not the first time I did a B2C company. I've been in consumer electronics companies. I've been in cybersecurity companies, raised money for all of those companies. This is a little bit different than those because, number one, at least here in the Israeli market, it's extraordinarily hard to raise money for a B2C mobile company. There are very, very few of us. I bet that none of you had even heard of Eyecon before, yet we have 55 million downloads, right? So it's not really in the ecosystem of Israeli companies to see B2C. And so it's very hard, as opposed to these other 25 startups, you get some traction, you get some B2B traction, you sign up a couple of companies, and all the investors know about you, and they want to jump on you and invest in you. Here, it's not that way. You have 55 million downloads, Israeli VCs are like, not such a big deal. So that's one big difference. The other is dynamic, right? I told this to Yuval when I first came into the company, I am a freak of data, and I love looking at data. It's like looking at the stock market, right? Every single morning you wake up, you see the reports overnight, and every single hour you're refreshing, you're seeing your monetization, you're seeing the user uptake. We have about 25,000 installs a day. That doesn't happen in a B2B company. It doesn't happen in even a consumer electronics company. This is like on the job, all the time, 24 hours. for me, only 6 days a week, not 7 days a week, but that's the difference for me.
Ken, I don't recommend you look at the stock market at the moment.
No, but our stock market is actually good.
Okay, so give it up for Ken Zweibel,
Thank you all.
Eyecon.